Welcome back to the eHunter podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Taryn Hunt. Excited to bring this podcast to you today, and want to tell you guys thank you for the support you give us here at eHunter, for the podcast, the website, everything that we do. Today's podcast is all about taxidermy and the questions that are around taxidermy. Don't think a lot of us think about taxidermy until that animal's on the ground, and then we think, oh goodness, now what are we going to do? So on the podcast today, I have Owen Kimberling. He is the owner of Prairie Ghost Artistry in Gillette, Wyoming. Owen's been a staff member for eHunter for quite some time, and he shares just a few tips, tricks, answers quite a few questions about taxidermy and how we should prepare as we go on these hunts. So if you have questions about taxidermy, or if you got some pretty cool hunts coming up, this is a great podcast for you to listen to. As always, we want to thank our sponsors, Vortex Optics. Vortex sponsors everything that we do here at eHunter, and we're grateful for them. Really putting them to work right now, doing a lot of glassing, scouting, getting ready for the hunts that are coming up for us here in the next couple of months. So excited to get behind that glass and hopefully harvest some pretty amazing animals. But want to thank Vortex for all that they do for us here at eHunter. So without further ado, guys, let's jump right into the podcast with Owen. Well, thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate you coming on and talking taxidermy with me a little bit.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity, and sometimes our profession kind of gets thrown under the bus, so it's not always talked about. So.
Well, it's always talked about as soon as you kill a really big animal, and then you're like, oh crap, who do I call now? That's usually when people think about it.
Right, I know. Yep.
Shoot. Well, cool, man. Well, let's get going on this.
Okay.
I'm really excited to ask you a bunch of questions tonight, and
sure.
Hopefully I don't get too far into the weeds. But I've got friends.
No, you're good.
I've got friends that are taxidermists, and I've never really asked them the questions. And I thought, you know what, this is something I feel like people could really use, because like we just said, most people don't think about it until they've killed that big animal, and then they're like, oh crap, now what do I do with it? So hopefully we can save some people some anguish by getting them some information.
Absolutely. It's funny because I just had a lady actually call me from Nebraska. Her and her daughter are actually coming out hunting in about a month, and so she had a ton of questions. So I always get those kinds of calls, so I appreciate it. So
nice. Well, before we get too far into this, if you wouldn't mind, give us a little intro of who you are, what you do, what your company is, and things like that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. My name is Owen Kimberling. I own Prairie Ghost Artistry, LLC, here in Gillette, Wyoming. I've been doing taxidermy, I guess, for about 8 years, I believe now. Wow. Started as kind of as a hobby, and I was doing stuff for friends. A good buddy of mine kind of showed me. He used to be a taxidermist back in Michigan years ago, and he kind of showed me, so we started doing it as a hobby. I was still working in law enforcement then, actually, and I got injured in the line of duty, and kind of ended my career in that. Had to have a bunch of surgeries because I got severely injured, and the business kind of just started from there, and here I am in 2021, and I do about 300 some animals a year, actually, and just a one-man show. I work here out of my house in Gillette, and it's a crazy thing. It's actually the best thing that I've probably done. I was in law enforcement for over 15 years, and that was a career, but I actually enjoy this a lot more than I did law enforcement. So.
Oh, heck yeah. Doing taxidermy is a whole lot more fun than pulling people over,
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, that's crazy. 300 animals a year. That's like, gosh, you're almost one a day.
It's, and that's kind of, it varies, but I am over at 300 animals this last year. I'm way behind, as you can imagine, with COVID. Has just been killing all of us, not just me, but even taxidermists that I know in other states or around the area. You even employ a lot of guys to help them in their business. Everybody is just so far behind because of COVID. I started early on, and I think my first year I started, I think I had like 60 animals, give or take, and that's anything from euros to actually mounts and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been building ever since then. And now, now I'm over 300. I don't think I'm going too much farther. I can't, like I said, I do this all by myself. It's tough.
Have you thought about bringing somebody else on to help you out?
I have, I have people that kind of help out at times. I have a cousin that lives in another state. He always flies in, and he usually hunts, but he usually stays for a couple weeks right at the beginning of the season and helps out, do intake and skin animals with me, and do all the paperwork and that type of stuff. My sister comes over. My wife helps out. I have a son and a daughter, and my son helps out more than my daughter does. My son helps out where he can. And then this last year, I actually had a high school student that came in when she would get out of school. She wants to be a game warden, so she came in and was skinning animals and caping heads and stuff after school for a while. But as a small business owner, it kind of, and the way I do things is kind of, I'm kind of hit or miss on how I do things, so it's been kind of tough. But I have people to help me out usually throughout the year here and there. So
Nice. Well, one of the questions I really wanted to ask you was about COVID. You kind of touched on it there, that it really hurt you. Like, specifically, what did COVID do to you guys as taxidermists? I know it like put a lot of things, like you couldn't get a lot of things and whatnot, but what else did it do to you?
It's actually killing us. I was just reading a Instagram post from another taxidermist that I follow in North Carolina, and COVID for the last 2 years has been killing the tannery business. And it has been because most of the big tanneries are back east. So there are some out west, but the biggest ones are back east. So that's usually where most of the taxidermists that don't do their own tanning send their capes and their hides.
Uh-huh.
And a year and a half, 2 years ago, it really started in, and the tanneries were starting to feel the effect, obviously, of the lockdowns and all that stuff, and sending people home and not being able to get employees. Last year I was about 3 months behind, give or take, because of the tanneries. Right now, I don't even know how far behind I am, but I'm pretty far behind. I got capes this year from this 2020 season to about 4.5 months behind where I usually do. As a matter of fact, I still have about 30-some capes out right now. And the tanneries that I talked to, they said that they're just so far behind because of other tanneries shutting down across the nation because of lack of employees. They can't get people to work. Nobody wants to work for $15 an hour at a tannery when they can sit at home and do nothing for making more off the government, right? So it's tough, and then on top of that, then you have the merchandise and the products. I just, for example, over the last 4 months, I think I've gotten emails from all the manufacturers that I use, and every one of them has gone up either from about 3% to about 8% in cost. And that doesn't include, all the shipping companies. FedEx and UPS now are adding an additional $25 surcharge for anything over 50 pounds that you ship. And then gas and diesel is just through the roof. But, like, for instance, today I was telling somebody earlier, a friend of mine, I went to order, I ordered some product today for some stuff, and I needed some paint. And the paint that I needed from the manufacturer has been sold out for like 10 months or been on back order for like 10 months because they can't find employees at these places to make this stuff or product. They can't get products to make it. So the company's having to tell me that they can sell me these other two to try to mix this to make this, and it's crazy.
Wow.
But it's killing us. I'm telling you, inflation is killing us. Like I said, I just read this post from taxidermist that I know from North Carolina, and he said it perfectly. He says, unfortunately, we have no idea what's going to happen. This might put us all out of business at the end of the day, if it continues to go up and we can't get, product and inflation just continues to rise, especially as a small business owner. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, that's the bad thing about most taxidermists is it is small business, and that's what COVID's doing. You look across the country. So I'm in the healthcare business for my real job, running a home health company, and luckily I work for a huge. It's the second largest home health company in the nation, but all the smaller ones are getting or they can't stay in business. They don't have the capital to stay in business, and so the poor small business of the world right now are just getting just slammed. I don't think it's going to get any better over the next little bit either. But so most taxidermists are small business type guys, and oh man, I've thought a lot about you guys. Sorry, go ahead.
It was kind of interesting because last year, before the 2020 season, my wife and I were really nervous because we were actually going to add on to my place, add on to my shop and that type of stuff. And, then COVID hit. So we were like, oh, we can't do that. We need to see how the season is going to, how it's going to happen and stuff, because of the lockdowns and everything. But last year, man, I mean, like here in Wyoming, we got inundated from people from out of state, inundated.
True.
And it was because of all the lockdowns. People wanted to get out, and all the people just said, heck with it, we're going to leave, and we're going to go hunting. And that's, I swear, it was the craziest thing here. It was the busiest season out hunting. Not even for me. I mean, obviously, it was the busiest season I've ever had. But it was the busiest season just out hunting in general here in Wyoming. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And, I don't know, it was kind of crazy to see that. I'm not sure that's going to happen again this year. I know that we're completely sold out of tags and that type of stuff. We're in a horrible drought right now. It's terrible here in Wyoming. I mean, we're at least where we're at. And, but the animals look good. Our numbers are down, but, I don't know what COVID's going to do. Obviously they're trying to lock us down again, like they're trying to do. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But, I'm not sure, I mean, I always know, when I started doing this, when I left law enforcement and going through all my stuff and, building the business, I always knew it was always going to be a roller coaster year to year, because you just never know how many clients you're always going to have. I mean, I have a ton of regular clients, even regular clients that are out of state, clients now. But I mean, it's just, it's always going to be that roller coaster because of people, fluctuating in and out hunting season, and I'm not a must. I talked to a ton of my clients in the last 2 years during COVID. I had to create this little paragraph that I always text my clients before I start, before I actually mount their animal, or I call them. I'm like, this whole thing, I know because of COVID, or, do you want me to still, proceed with your animal because you just don't know. And I told people the same thing. I'm like, look, I get it. I'm at the bottom of the order. I want your family first. And, luckily enough, I mean, knock on wood, I didn't have any clients that backed out of any mounts or anything like that in the last 2 years during COVID. So
good.
I've been blessed there. So.
Man, you're right though. You had such a good point there because, well, I hunted in Colorado and Utah last year, and I don't think I've seen that many people on the mountain in a very, very long time. I swear everybody in COVID decided to go on the mountain and go hunt for some reason. I guess COVID
crazy.
just drove them to do it.
It was nuts. I had never, and I talked to, obviously we've only been here in Wyoming since 2010. But I never seen anything like what I saw this last year during hunting season. And that included from the beginning of archery season all the way through late season rifle. I had never seen that many people. Usually during archery season, you just see a few guys here and there.
Right.
Usually most archery stuff is early season deer or elk hunting. But I mean, I had never seen guys out where usually where we hunt, during archery season, and it was just nonstop all season long. I felt bad for Fish and Game. They were swamped, for like 4 months straight. It was crazy. But
it'll be
it was
interesting.
good. I mean, it was good for the economy.
It was. And it'll be interesting what it does this year, too. I'll be interested to see if, like, where I hunted in Colorado, if it'll be a slam with people as it was last year. Because I talked to a lot of people, and there were a lot of people that were really frustrated because, like, there's just too many people out on the mountain. We can't even hunt deer right now because there's just too many people. So I wonder if it'll frustrate people or if it's just going to continue on and more people are not going to be doing anything else, so they're going to want to get on the mountain and they're going to be hunting. So it's going to be interesting to see what the 2021 season brings.
I don't know. I mean, it's that, like I said, our antelope numbers are down here in Wyoming, and we can blame it on 25 different things, but they're down. It seems like, I mean, we sold out again like always, and for non-residents, so it seems like it's going to be a busy a busy season. And with inflation, that's another thing people need to think about. With inflation, people are going to be, not in, they're not going to want to spend as much money, but yet they're going to want to come out and take the best opportunity they can for the money that they already have spent.
Right.
So I think we're still going to see maybe not as many as we did last year, because I think, the country opened up quite a bit, in the last year or, 8-9 months, I guess. But I mean, us in Wyoming, I don't think we ever closed down. But, I think the rest of the other country has been open, give or take, for about 8-9 months. And I think we'll still see big numbers out hunting, but I don't think it'll be like last year.
Good. That makes me feel good, because I've been hoping that was going to be how it turned out. I love seeing a lot of guys on the mountain, but yeah, I love seeing them out there. And like you said, it's good for the economy, and it's good for hunting. It's good that a lot of people are getting into it, and
absolutely.
I swear, hunting and golf are the two things that everybody got into. My two favorite hobbies. Everybody got into it last year. So, but at the same time, I would like to have a little bit of the mountain back to myself and not see a ranger or something everywhere I go.
I don't disagree there. Yeah.
Well, let's talk taxidermy. So really what I was hoping to do, Owen, is just, like I said, a lot of people don't think about taxidermy until they actually kill that animal, and then they're like, oh crap, now what do I do, and who do I call, and whatnot. So I really kind of want to just give people a glimpse or an idea of what they really should do, how they should prepare before they go on the hunt, what they should do when they do harvest that animal, how quickly they need to get it to a taxidermist, things like that. So let's start from kind of the beginning, and that is, what do you recommend that hunters do before? Should say I'm going to Colorado on a great mule deer hunt? Should I contact a taxidermist before I leave, saying, hey, this may or may not happen, or should I, what do you recommend in that situation?
It's like I told the lady today, and I mean, I get quite a few of these phone calls, before the season, in midsummer, late summer, and then right before the season. It's like this, we all that hunt out of state or whatever, we spend a lot of money on these tags and rifles and vehicles and Onyx maps and all this studying and backpacks and boots. But yeah, when it comes down to it, we all hope and dream that we're going to go and we're going to shoot this big animal, right? Mm-hmm. But there's very few of the hunters, and I'm all, usually just talking about non-residents. There's very few that actually does or that do the research, and they're like, okay, I need to research lockers in the area of where I'm going to be. That's one. If I need my animal cut up, yep. And then two, if I do shoot something, how am I going to, field dress it, take care of it? And are there any taxidermists in the area that I can take my animal to? And I always tell people the same thing. I'm like, look, just like the lady today, I said, here's the locker that I recommend. There's a couple in the area. I'm like, this is the closest one to me. I'm like, I pick up items from there. This is, look up. And she had their number. I'm like, give them a call, get you a price. And that's what she needed. And I said, and then, we can work into my stuff, and I think that's the biggest thing is, on that end to do it. And then look at weather, because that makes a huge, difference too. Are you coming early season? It's 90 degrees out today.
Right.
So if I'm coming in August or September, okay, so now the weather is going to be hot. I need to look at, a little bit differently than I am whether it's snowing and it's going to be, negative 20 out. In the instance of taking care of your animal, and on the same, storyline of being able to take care of it for a taxidermist. Yeah. But I do recommend, contacting any taxidermist in the area that you're going to be, researching them online, and then doing the same for any locker, and I'll be upfront. I am a self-taught taxidermist. I consider myself a hunter's taxidermist.
Yeah.
I don't do competitions or anything like that. I don't believe in them. And don't get me wrong, I've been to some competitions and I've sat through classes and I learned stuff. I'm always up to learning. I'm not, I don't consider myself an expert by any means, but that a lot of guys kind of get into this, into this treasure trove of, I need the best and the baddest, and we all hear it, we all know them, and sometimes we even do it. It's the same thing comparing Swarovskis to Vortex or something
Right.
like that. I mean, and at the end of the day, where you're going hunting. If you're going hunting in Colorado and you're going to Gunnison, I'm going to research the taxidermists around there. Same thing with the lockers. And okay, there's 4 taxidermists. Okay, well, I can look up, social media is huge now. I can look up social media, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be, or if they have websites, and look up and see, compare and look at the pictures or whatever it may be. And some of the best taxidermists that I know don't have websites,
Yeah.
don't have pictures online.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a website, but I'm on social media. And I get a ton of clientele because I advertise on social media. I put a ton of pictures on social media. And that's what my out-of-state clients always tell me, is they're like, you're one of the first ones to answer your phone and give it, and have a conversation with us. And we can see what type of work that you do because your pictures that you put online, because some of these other guys don't. So I think ultimately, that's the number one thing you should do if you draw a tag and you're going out of state as a out of state resident, going in and hunting in these states. So.
That's cool. And I've kind of thought that, and I've actually done that as I've gone to different states, or even within the same state, but
Yep.
going across state, and I'd find taxidermists in the area and always give them a call and just talk to them, and because it seems like every taxidermist is a little bit different in what they prefer. Do you want the whole
Correct.
animal? Do
Yep.
you want me to try and cape it? What do you want me to do in that situation? So you usually got to reach out beforehand, and more than anything, honestly, just to get to know them a little bit, so that when I did call them saying, hey, I've got this animal, they're like, okay, I know Taryn, he called me, he already talked to me, I'm somewhat familiar with this guy's voice. So.
Yep. I mean, I've had several clients over the last few years that have called me numerous times, or they even text. I tell them, I'm like, text me. I'm like, I might not get right back to you, but just make sure you put your name in there. I'm like, but I will respond to you. And I get a message of me on Facebook or Instagram, same thing. Here's a big one that I always tell people. I tell people, I ask them, I said, have you ever gutted or skinned or caped an animal? And you always get that kind of hesitation, and you get, well, yeah, obviously everybody does, but yeah, but I'm not sure about skinning or this and that. And I always say the same thing, like, go to YouTube and just look and type in how to cape a mule deer. I'm like, and if you want, I can send you some YouTube, and that's exactly what I told the lady today. I'm like, I'll send you some YouTube videos. I'm like, it's just a general information, and it'll get you through. I mean, I've walked over the last 8 years. I've probably walked 10 to 20 guys, probably, how to cape an animal on the phone while they're in the field with the animal.
Oh, that's good to know. I'm going to call you the next time I'm skinning an animal.
And I'm going to be honest. I mean, I'm not, I know there are guys out there like me, but I know some of them aren't that way, but I think the more research that you do as a hunter, and the more conversation that you have with this taxidermist, I think is the bet, is how you're going to win at the end of the day. And it'll be the better choice. I mean, I've always strived, business wise, customer service, is where I'm at. That's why I consider myself a hunter's taxidermist. I'm a hunter, I'm a hunter first and foremost. And I want your stuff. I want you to be proud of your animal when you give it to me and I give it back to you, and you look at it and say, that's exactly how it was. I'm not that. I think that's kind of the separation between myself and somebody that's been winning world championships for 10 decades or however long. So
right. No, that's the kind of taxidermist I would want, as a hunter's taxidermist, the one that knows how I feel when I bring that animal to you, and knows kind of really what I expect, what I'm looking for. And I think you kind of got to be a hunter's taxidermist to be able to do that. So so okay, so we out hunting, as they shoot that animal, do you recommend that someone completely skin the animal all the way, to the nose, or do you like to have them only go so far, or do you like them just bring the whole animal to you? What's your preference in that situation?
Well, let me kind of, I'll answer that. Let me kind of go back on, obviously it depends on the animal, right? On how we're going to do it. Let's just talk about Wyoming's number one animal,
Antelope.
pronghorn,
Yeah.
and you can't do anything with the thing, literally. I mean, once you shoot it, you cannot drag it, because if you drag it, the hair will fall out.
Yep.
And you can't. I mean, you can drag it, but you need to pick the shoulders up way off the ground.
Yeah.
And the more you touch it, the hair falls out, obviously, because the hair's hollow. So and you're going to take that into consideration compared to a mule deer, right? Early season mule deer, has the shorter hair. Same thing. You don't want to drag it because obviously you can have more scuff marks, that type of stuff.
Right.
So you need to consider what type of animal you have, and obviously an elk or something bigger, you can't even move anyway. So you're pretty much stuck either way.
Yeah.
But honestly, in the field, unless you, I would say this, and this is what I tell people: unless you've absolutely caped animals and you've been doing it for many years and you know exactly how to do it as far as caping around the eyes and that stuff, I don't want you to do any of that.
Okay.
So I prefer that you just gut the animal, you gut it right to the sternum bone. And then you go about halfway back, I'm talking 4 or 5 ribs, maybe even farther back, go around the body. And then you just go straight up the back if that's what you're comfortable with. And then just skin it around, that way, the legs and stuff, skin it all the way up to the vertebrae of the neck, and then basically saw it off right there and bring me the taxidermist, the head with the hide still on it, and then the rest of it, and then let me do the rest. And I think that's the best thing. That's the best advice that you could give any of us. Obviously the number one rule that everybody knows, if you've ever hunted, is you can never have too much hide for any animal when you give it to the taxidermist. And trust me, in the last 2 weeks, I think I've had at least 7, 8 animals that have been way short.
Oh,
so,
man.
I mean, and it's crazy, and it happens. I mean, it happens every year. I mean, guys are out in the field and their cuts are crooked, or they just don't leave us enough. So, I think that's the best. So.
What do you do if it's short? I mean, do you have to find a different cape, or what do you do in those
situations?
situations?
Man, it depends on how short it is. Obviously, if you're talking like 6-8 inches short, there's really, the way I'd always look at it is I look at the animal and I'm like, man, this is going to be short, and I'll usually try to tell the client, okay, you have a few options. Yeah, obviously we could try to get another cape, and some of my clients are, the majority are okay, no big deal. Let's just get another cape if you have one or whatever it may be, and then there's other clients that are like, man, I really want, that's my animal. I'm like, okay, well then, let's consider our options here. We might have to alter the mannequin, and if it's way short, I'm not going to alter the mannequin that short, because then you just have a neck mount.
Right. That looks funny.
So, it just kind of depends, the majority of the time, it's usually just like, one side. You usually like, they've either shot the animal, behind the front leg or something, or in the front leg. And so one side is shorter than the other. So you just kind of play with, okay, so the left side is real short and the right side's fine. So let's make sure that the left side is hidden in the back of the mount, and then the right side's open to your view when you're looking at it, in front or whatever it may be. So, again, my best, my suggestion and the way I do it is my conversation with my clients, and just I take pictures. If my clients are out of state and I'm looking at it, I take a lot of pictures. I text it to them. I'm like, here you go. I'm like, give me a call, and they call me, and, I bet 99% of the time they're like, Owen, just do what you think is best.
Yeah.
Do what you think is best.
Yeah.
They're like, you're there, you're the professional. We trust you. Do what you think is best. And at the end of the day, they're usually happy with it.
So at the end of the day, leave as much hide on that as you can. In fact,
absolutely.
It's funny, as I'm still yet to kill a big bull elk. I've killed spike elk and whatnot, and cows, and every time I do, I've killed smaller bull elk too. But every time I do, I'm always like thinking, okay, if this was a 400-inch bull, what would I do with it? And that's how I take care of it, just to practice, just so that when that time comes, hopefully that time comes, I don't have a pissed taxidermist at me.
No, and I think as long as you have enough. Obviously, if you make other cuts and stuff, we're going to have to sew. I mean, the, number one thing, top 5 things we do is sewing. I've spent, a couple hours before sewing, a cape for a deer, or,
Wow.
or an elk, because, somebody cut it here or whatever it may be. But, it is what it is at the end of the day with that. A lot of people, not leaving enough is one thing, or sometimes they get confused on what to do with the legs, and the best advice I could give on that is, when you go up to the sternum and you stop when you gut it, and then you go back, 4 or 5 ribs back, and then you cut around, go to those legs, go right to the back of them, and you have 2 choices. Either you could cut the leg off at the knuckle and then, skin the inside around, the leg, and then try to pop, the leg itself, through the cape, or you could just take your knife and run right up the back of the leg, and then right up to like the armpit, and then right straight to, the chest, to the sternum, which you've already cut. It kind of makes a V.
Yeah.
And honestly, unless we're doing like a wall pedestal that's way back or something like that, all that's going to be plenty long enough. And sometimes I have to sew that, but you know what? I would rather have that at the end of the day than some random cut or something like that. So.
Yeah. Honestly, that's what I usually try to do on mine, is cut up the back of the leg and make that V there to try and leave as much as I can and without just completely haggling it. So, and I do find that I go through a lot of blades. I'm an outdoor edge kind of guy, and I end up going through a ton of blades, especially on an elk, a bull elk, man. Those things.
Oh yeah, terrible.
They eat up blades.
Terrible. Yeah, when that hide is like a, 3/4 of an inch or an inch thick, it's terrible.
Oh, it's
terrible.
Absolutely horrible. What about? I mean, does it change? Like, and what I'm thinking is, like, say someone shoots this trophy animal right next to the road. I mean, would it be best just to gut that thing and bring the whole animal to you from there?
Yeah, we have. We're lucky here because both of the lockers here, actually, if you take their animal to them, they'll charge you like $25 when you take it in to have it processed. They'll hang it up on their hangers and they'll cape it for you. And basically you tell them, hey, it's for a taxidermist. They'll cut off the head. They'll cape it, like you would in the field. They'll cape it, cut off the head, and they leave it for the taxidermist to pick up. So, that's why I said I pick up heads all the time at the lockers here in town. I've had guys call me and they're like, hey, I gutted this, but I have no idea what else to do. Can you please do this? Usually, unless I'm completely swamped at that moment, I'll be like, okay, bring it in to me, and I'll just do it real quick. And I'll do it on the truck bed of your truck, or if I have people helping me, they'll help or do it real quick, or I'll throw it on one of my tables and I'll just do it real quick. Okay. I can't answer, how if a lot of other guys do that. I mean, I know that there are taxidermists out there that do it. But yeah, luckily here in Campbell County where we're at, are both of our lockers. And I even know the lockers in some of the other counties do the same exact thing. And the way I look at it is, like I was telling the lady today, I'm like, it's for $25.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you don't know what to do, and you can't get a hold of me or I'm swamped, that's the best thing to do. Those guys will just hang it up real quick and they'll just, it's a 5-10 minutes at the most for them, and it's done. They know exactly how I want it or how we want it. They'll cut it off and you leave it there for us to pick up, or they'll give it right back to you to bring to us. I'm like, honestly, man. I mean, that's, how could you beat that? Honestly,
you can't. You can't beat that. That's a sweet deal.
And I think the only thing on that is depending on the weather. So you need to really, if it's early, antelope season here opens in a couple of weeks.
Uh-huh.
So if it's 90 degrees out, you need to make sure that you bring that. If you bring that animal in whole, you need to do it like now.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't drive around for 2 hours and then decide that you're going to bring that animal in and try to do that,
Yeah.
But it needs to come in now because, a lot of people don't understand that the heat, that an animal has, that'll get trapped inside, between that hide and that meat stuff, and it'll, on hot days, even the bed of the truck or the sun shining on it, whatever, it'll go bad quickly.
Yes.
So
I know that from experience with antelope, especially. It shot an antelope. It was about a 2 hour drive to get it home. I didn't have a big enough cooler to put it in, and yeah, it doesn't take long for that gamey smell to get into that meat, and ooh, makes it
no,
taste a
it
little
doesn't.
funky.
And I mean, you know, it's crazy. I've learned over the years. There's really, at the end of the day, I don't know if there's anything really that you can do to prevent slipping.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, oh, this and that. And, honestly, it's bacteria that gets in there. And, I mean, I've seen over the years, it kind of varies year to year, but obviously the number one area that animals always slip is behind the ears.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mainly because there's so much heat behind the ears. And it doesn't matter what animal, always behind the ears. And then in the face. And I think a lot of the stuff on the face, usually on the nose area, and I think that kind of has to do with having full exposure to the sun after they kill the animal. A lot of guys think, oh well, I caped it out, and the cape is all back in the back of my truck, and I'm driving 80 down the road, but everything should be fine. I'm like, well, yeah, but you're also forgetting that it's 90 degrees out, and the sun is shining straight into your truck, maybe off your window or just off the paint off your truck, and it's roasting.
Yeah.
It's literally roasting that head, And then, sometimes I'm an honest guy. I tell people, I'm like, okay, just because you bring it to me doesn't mean I can jump on it like right now.
Right.
I think there was one day last year I had like 25 antelope here, laying here on the floor.
Gosh.
And I mean, it was nuts. And I was like, oh my God, I don't even know. I mean, I had like 2 or 3 guys helping me, but I was like, I don't even know what to do right now. I mean, I have so many animals that are coming in right now. And so, sometimes I just tell people, I'm like, look, just because, you brought it to me within 2 hours, it doesn't mean I'm able to jump on it right now, So it's important that you do your part to be able to keep it as cool as you can, before it gets to me or gets to a taxidermist.
Man, that's crazy. One thing I always think about with heat is, so here in Utah, well, I guess most states, archery hunting is the first one that comes available, and it's in August. And like the mule deer, their antlers are still, they still have the velvet on them.
Oh yeah.
And that's the one thing
Velvet,
I always worry about is that velvet. I never know what to do with it. Put it in a cooler with ice if it'll fit. A lot of those antlers won't fit in a cooler. And what do you do with those?
When I was a kid, we used to backpack in the high country. We used to go about 14 to 20 some miles in the back country.
Whew.
And we used to at those days, my dad, growing up hunting in the 70s and 80s, he used to backpack all the time to shoot some humongous bucks.
Mm-hmm.
And he would tell me, best thing to do is formaldehyde. So we used to carry formaldehyde, and I used to carry a syringe always in my backpack. Nowadays, there's so many different products that can do pretty much the same thing. I mean, you can use anything from turpentine to denatured alcohol, anything like that, even formaldehyde if you can find it. There's all kinds of aftermarket products out there, velvet lock. There's all kinds of different things that you can buy to do the same thing. Buy a syringe and just take it and just rinse it. One of the biggest things about velvet, animals, so velvet deer in particular during early season, the number one thing is do not grab those antlers. Do not grab them.
Yeah.
Try to keep your hands off of them as much as possible. If you cape that animal, try to set that thing up and just do not touch it. There's some, depending on when you shoot them, that you'll be able to tell. You're like, you can maybe grab them. You're like, oh man, I mean, it is like really loose and really bloody underneath. And, if I touch this thing, it's like literally going to rip the whole thing off.
Right.
And then there's other velvet deer that you grab and you're like, man, it's stuck on there pretty good. It's not going anywhere. So it kind of varies. I always have guys early season that freak out. They call and they're like, man, I have this thing. And I'm like, just get it to me. Just don't touch it. Do the least amount of touching that you can. Get it to me. As soon as on those type of things, as soon as they get it to me, I usually will I'll keep the head out real quick, and then I'll go into the process real quick. And I usually syringe the heck out of them with the different products and sometimes I'll soak them in denatured alcohol, the horn, the antlers themselves. And then there's a process. I'll hang them upside down, let the blood drip out for like 24 hours, and I'll redo the process again with more denatured alcohol or whatever product that I'm using at the moment. And then I'll let it hang again for another 24 hours, and then I'll check it. And then if it needs it again, I'll do it again and let them hang upside down again. And it's like a 4 or 5 day process. Honestly.
Oh, wow.
Just to get it to where I can feel comfortable that majority of that blood is out, and then I continue on from there. So it takes a little bit when I'm doing them like that. Obviously, there's a ton of taxidermists now in the bigger areas like Utah. I'm sure where you're at, there's quite a bit of guys that have, or I shouldn't say quite a bit, but there are a few guys that have freeze dryers.
Yeah.
And the freeze dryers are not cheap. They're like $15,000-$20,000.
Oh,
so I mean, you have to have. Yeah, they're expensive. I mean, you have to have, you guys have the early season where the majority of those early deer are velvet buck. So those taxidermists get a ton of velvet, animals. So it makes sense for them to get. We don't get that many here. So,
gotcha.
I mean, freeze drying is the new thing for that type of stuff. They turn out perfect. But yeah, I mean, I would only suggest that if you live somewhere like right close that you can drive that buck to a taxidermist that has a freeze dryer.
Gotcha. So there's a company called Velvet Antler Technologies. I think you mentioned,
Yep.
Is it Velvet Lock? Is that what you had mentioned?
Yeah,
yeah. Is that like a good thing if you are hunting early season archery mule deer? Like, would that be a good thing to have in your backpack and just spray that on as soon as you shoot it?
I would. Yep, I would. Honestly, there's a couple things I would carry. If you are doing a early season archery or even early season rifle deer hunt, that you figure the chances are pretty good that you might kill pretty good buck in velvet. And I would definitely carry a couple syringes with you and some sort of product like that in your backpack. You don't need a whole lot of it, but you just need enough to be able to start flushing that blood out. You know what I mean? Because it's the blood underneath that velvet that makes it rot, and then it makes it loose and it'll start to come off. But if you can wash that blood out, it'll start to dry up if you hang those horns upside down or just leave them alone. And then the other product, obviously, or other thing would be salt. If you're hunting in the backcountry and early season deer, you better have salt on you if you plan on saving a cape if you shoot a big buck. So you need to carry some salt on you.
Gotcha. That's good tips right there. That's really good tips, because most of my buddies, and I know of quite a few people that listen to this podcast, that's what their big thing is, early season archery mule deer, and so they're always killing animals in the velvet. So that's really good tips right there.
That's like I said, I learned that. I was probably 10 years old when I started backpacking in the high country with my dad, and we took horses sometimes, and then more than likely most of the time we backpacked in. But I always carried that. I always carried that formaldehyde syringes, and I carried salt. And there's been a couple bucks when I was younger that I killed, pooping young bucks that I didn't have, I didn't have either one of them with me, and I regret it. I ended up having to pay the price at the end of the day when I got home, and had to go the route of fake velvet and a new cape. But that's definitely the two things that if you can fit it in, that's what I would do. And I had some clients that went to Alaska caribou hunting. I think it was last year, and they figured that they were going to be, that they would kill some caribou. So the one client asked me what I thought, and I said, "Man, you need to take some salt." And he's like, "Yeah, I think you're right." And I said, "Yeah, you need, take some." So we kind of got an idea of how much to pack, and he packed it and stuff. It's kind of a funny story, because when he went through, or when they checked his bag and they asked him what that white powder stuff was, and they actually made him cut one of the bags open.
They thought it was crack.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's, those two things are for early season mule deer hunting. Definite. That is a definite. So.
Oh man, that's good info. Heck yeah, I appreciate that. Hey, let me ask you a couple other questions here. Kind of go on the same topic. So now we've moved on, and you got we got it done, we got it to you, and it's being worked on. How long? What's the turnaround on animals nowadays? Because I remember gosh, back when I was a kid and first got into hunting, the taxidermist in my local here in my local town, I mean, he could take years, to be completely honest with you, to get an animal back to you. What's the turnaround on a shoulder mount for an elk these
Man,
days?
man,
The $1 million question right
um,
there, huh?
it is, I think you can go to any taxidermist, even for guys like me that is just, small business, one guy, to, other taxidermists that have multiple employees. I mean, obviously there's big taxidermists out there that have, 5 to 10, 12 guys working for them, and they're like, oh, we get this done in 3-4 months,
Oh,
but you're going to pay extra, that type stuff.
gotcha.
For somebody like me, my the usually the answer is always a year, right? I mean, that's always usually the answer.
Okay.
For the last um, probably probably the last 7 years, I guess, for me, it was always a year. But my usual turnaround time was anywhere between about average was anywhere between about nine months to a year. I mean, sometimes you might get your animal back in 6. And again, that goes back to what I talked about early on the tannery.
Yeah.
I'm a one-man show. I used to, when I first started, I did some of my tanning, on the deer and antelope myself, so it kind of helped a little bit, but that's not the case anymore because obviously I have more, my numbers are more. But, so a lot of that time you're waiting on the tanneries and then everything else that goes along with that and all the other projects that you have. But, honestly, I don't know. I think that everybody could give you a different answer. I mean, there's some taxidermists out there right now that could give you an answer of 2 years to
Yeah.
3 years, on some animals. There's some different projects that are going to take longer. There's some guys that are just so busy and, and they're, experts or whatever, and they take, minimum of 2 years. And I know those guys, and I hear the clients, tell me that all the time. They're like, yeah, I dropped off this lion and he flat out said it'd be 2.5 years. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I don't doubt it. I
Yeah.
mean, I know the time it goes into stuff.
So
I mean, it's just a process. So
so if you weren't so busy, if like say you had this probably never ever will happen in your future, but say you had no projects to do, and I brought you a bull elk, and the tannery was quick. Like, I mean, is 6 months a realistic turnaround time if you had nothing else going on? Or what's the fastest
yeah,
I guess you
six
could do
months.
it?
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it is, everything is timing for like me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky enough that the tannery that I use picks up from me once a month.
Oh,
So,
that's
which
good.
is good.
Yeah.
And then during hunting season, it's really good because then I have, 60, 70 capes that I'm, getting to the semi, once a month or whatever it may be. If they can, when I first started using this tannery, they were, 2 to 4 months. So yeah, I mean, if you bring me that elk in October and I get that elk out, and let's say it just happens to be that the truck is coming three weeks from when you bring that to me. So I get that elk out in October, right, to the tannery, and I'm getting that, that elk back. Let's just say it's November, December, January. I get that elk back in early March. And I don't have, too much other stuff going on or whatever it may be. Yeah, I mean, that's 6 months is could be close to reality, and it still could be even if the tannery is a little bit long. Like I said, I mean, there for years I was 6 months, and I still am on some of my animals. I mean, I have still a ton of clients that I get stuff to 6 months, after they drop it off. It's just some of it just varies. It really does, And I'm going to be honest, the more damage to your animal that you have, it's going to
Yeah.
take me a little bit longer, right? So, I mean, if I can jump on and I can mount 2 deer in a day that are perfectly fine, that don't have, any abnormal sewing, which means, no, hasn't been shot 10 times each, and cut up the brisket 8 inches, I can mount those, 2 today and be done with those. And, you might get those back in 6 months or maybe even sooner, or, might be 8 months. It just depends. So.
Gotcha. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, depending on the product that's brought into you, it would definitely
Yep.
dictate to how long it's going to take to get it done. And I know there's a
Correct.
ton of variables as far as, yeah, the product, the supplies, how busy you are. I mean, I guess kind of what I want to get out there is that, you know, for most people taking an animal to a taxidermist is just be patient. You know, if it does take 2 years or 3 years, hey, you know, just know that you're going to have a good product when it's done, and it's going to be what you want it to be.
It's tough, you know. I mean, my wife and I were looking yesterday. We rearranged some stuff, and yesterday, and I was looking at my stuff, and I get it. I mean, you know, I have there's some big animals in there right now, and I'm like, man, you know, my wife says, yeah, there's some people waiting on these, and I said, yeah, I mean, I know, and they know it, you know, and I get texts, you know, and majority of the time it's just like, hey, just checking on the progress or whatever, you know, haven't heard from you in a little bit or whatever it may be. And I would say the majority of hunters understand. There are a few, you know, obviously there are a few that kind of, you know, don't. But that's you know, that's everything in life.
I was gonna say that whether it doesn't matter what field you're in, there's always those people, you know.
And on top of that, I would rather say, hey, you know what, Taryn, your elk's going to be a year minimum, okay, or might even be 14 months. And all of a sudden, at 7 months, I text you a picture of your elk and it's mounted, and you're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
You know, and you're ecstatic about it being mounted and done. You know what I mean? So, you know, and I get those guys all the time, and they're happy, you know, and I get it. I mean, everybody wants their animal. They've dropped it off for a reason, you know, and that's their memory of the hunt that they had here, you know, of that trip, and they just want it back so they can look at it, you know, just like we all do at the end of the day. So I understand that completely.
My taxidermist in Colorado did that to me this last year. I shot a really nice bull elk in Colorado. I just want it Euro mounted. And when I took it in there, I was like, well, how long is it going to be? He's like, oh, you probably better give me 6 months. And I'm like, for a Euro mount? I thought to myself, that's a lot, but he's you know, a busy shop. I was like, okay, 6 months. He called me 60 days later. Hey, Taryn, come pick up your bull, and sent me a picture of it. I was like, oh, that was very cool to get it back earlier than planned, and I think he knew what he was doing.
It's, you know, it's the way I've, you know, and it's always been, you know, a learning curve for me on all this stuff that I do, because obviously before I started this, I'd never planned on being in business for myself. So everything I do is always a learning curve to something, and I think that's the better. You know, what he did is the same thing I do. You know, and sometimes I, you know, falter a little bit, but you know, if I give you an expectation of, hey, it's going to be 6 months to a year, and like, you know, and it's 3 months that I call you, and I'm like, hey, here's a snap pic of your elk, you're ecstatic, right? You're through the roof because you can't believe it, right? Yeah. But then again, if it's 8 months, you're like, okay, yeah, he told me 6 months to a year, you know. And sometimes, you know, some people will look at me and they're like, especially on European, everybody thinks a European is the easiest thing to do, right? No,
depends on how you do it.
One of the most hated. It's one of the most hated things ever. But
I've done it myself, and it is miserable.
You know, it still takes time, regardless. And and again, you know, if that's all I did every day, then yeah, I could get it done in a week or two. Yeah. You know, but it's not. You know, I'm taking in animals, and I got all this other stuff, just like every other taxidermist out there. So, and there's a lot of taxidermists that don't like them completely. They hate them.
Oh, really?
You know, and so I mean, it's just tough. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't. And why don't they? Why don't they like them?
Well, because when I did my own, it was that boiling part was just so nasty.
Well, I mean, even if you use, whether you use boiling or macreation, or you use beetles, right? It's still nasty. Okay, and it still takes time. So that's one of the reasons why. But the other reason is that taxidermists are artists, the majority of them, so they would rather do the mounts because that's what they enjoy more. Yeah. And that's where they're going to make the most money, right? I mean, you know, European mounts, you're making like your fast money, okay, even though they're not fast. Right. But that's where you're making your fast money. You know, on the mounts, you're taking more pride and joy into it, and you're making more money, and you're more of an artist if that's what you see yourself as. So that's the main reasons right there.
Man, that's a really good point, because he really tried to talk me into mounting it. I didn't bring in the cape or anything. He's like, dude, I've got a cape right here. I'll just do a shoulder mount for you. I'm like, I was like, how much is it? And when he told me, I was like, man, it was more obviously, but when I compared it to what I was
Yeah.
paying for the euro, I was like, man, that's really not that bad. And I mean, he really had me thinking, like, should I really do a shoulder mount on this with his cape that he's got? And but that makes sense of why he wanted to talk me into doing that.
Yeah, and I'd learned that from I actually learned that a few years back from taxidermists that have been doing it for 20 some years, and that's what they kind of told me. So then when I sat there and I listened to what they told me, and I was like, that makes 100% sense
Yeah.
now that I'm thinking about that of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I do probably, I think my average right now is about 130 euros a season, which is crazy. And it's a lot. It's ridiculous. And so the other taxidermists around here, they don't care to do them, and they actually send them out to get done. So it's,
Gotcha.
so, and they charge way more than I do. So it's kind of I kind of get, I kind of get the end of it, because I get more of them because I do them, and people trust me to do them and that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, when I was talking to them and they were explaining it to me, I was like, that makes more sense. I'd rather mount, a 30-inch mule deer or a 16-inch antelope or, 350-inch bull rather than do this European. You know what I mean? So even though I like Europeans, but
it makes sense
yeah,
to do the full shoulder mount on them.
Yeah, and Euros were they still are big, but they were really big a few years back for whatever reason. I know it's always trendy, but man, I did there for a few years. I was doing so many different projects with Euros. I was doing barnwood scenes and all kinds of things with them. I mean, it was crazy the type of stuff that I was making. With just like a regular 24-inch mule deer Euro, and then I would make a this barnwood window looking thing and have a log coming down and a scene and the head would sit right in the middle. Man, I did all kinds of crazy stuff with those Euros, and it was like a huge trend for a few years.
Jeez.
So,
it's funny you say that because I'm sitting here and I've got 3 of my Euro mounts like sitting right next to me, and it's funny how different they were all done. And yeah, you can definitely tell we went through a trend. And you're right. I guess you really don't see not a ton of Euros nowadays like you were. I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're still there. Pinterest. I tell everybody because I have pictures on Pinterest and stuff. I have all kinds of pictures on Pinterest. But Pinterest, I tell guys all the time, I'm like, go to Pinterest. I'm like, one, you can look at shoulder mounts, regular taxidermy mounts, all kinds of different scenes of animals. I'm like, and then Euros, you can see all kinds of different designs, and I have a bunch of them on there. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, if you can think, and on top of that, and the one thing we all know, the majority of wives, would rather see some Euro that has some sort of barnwood scene or something, and they'd rather, they would rather like that rather than some just deadhead sitting up on the wall, staring at people when they walk in or whatever.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like though I'm seeing like you're talking about those, like just a regular 24-inch mule deer. I feel like there's a lot more people just doing a shoulder mount on those nowadays than Euro mounts. I feel like I follow a lot of taxidermists. I guess this is where I'm getting my information from is social media. But I follow a lot of taxidermists on social media, and I'm seeing a lot of bucks that are shoulder mounted that I don't know that I would have seen in the past. They would have just been a Euro mount, but I feel like a lot of people are actually mounting them.
I get so 2 things on that. I think one is what is the questions I get all the time that guys come in, and they'll look at me and they're like, "What do you think?" And I look at them, and unless they're like a regular client from like here in town,
yeah,
the majority are out of state clients, and I'll look at them and say, "Is that usually it's pronghorn? Is that the first animal that you've ever shot?" Well, yeah. Are you planning on coming back? Well, probably not for years. I'm like, well, what do you think about it? And they'll say, and I'm like, it doesn't matter what I think at the end of the day.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to tell you, sometimes I will step in and say, I think that deer needs to be mounted.
Yeah.
Or that antelope needs, or that elk needs. I mean, and I have done that a few times, and they were very thankful at the end of the day.
Yeah.
When you have a 185-inch mule deer, and they're like, well, I'm like, that deer needs to be won.
Yeah, put that on the wall.
You know, but
Yep.
you know, I think that's one of it. You know, so again, it kind of goes back to that whole aspect of spending the money and getting what you want out of it. You know, on those tags and rifles and trucks and gas and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think, you know, also think that we have a ton of new hunters or outdoorsmen or outdoors women in the field now. And, you know, those 20-inch bucks, you know, are the biggest things that they've ever seen or shot.
True.
You know, I mean, I know guys that I hunted, you know, with for years that, you know, their biggest animals were 24-inch mule deer.
Yeah.
You know, especially like a bow, you know, and I always tell people a bow kill is a bow kill.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a trophy, literally.
Oh, yeah.
You know, any bow kill is a trophy.
Yeah. You can put any bow
but I
kill
think
on the wall and I'll be proud of you.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, I think those are kind of the factors, you know, in it is what do you see? You know, do you see that 24-inch mule deer as just that, or do you see it as, hey, this could be my last trip with my dad, or this is our first time with my son that I've been out of state, or that type of stuff, and how much money I've spent on it, you know, and I think that's the difference. You know, I get guys that walk in all the time, and they're like, man, I can't believe some of the stuff that these guys mount, and I'm like, it doesn't matter what you think.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, it truly doesn't. It's up to them, you know, and that's the way I look at it, you know, and you know, it's the same thing, you know, they'll tell me, you know, well, why do you allow them to do that? I'm like, what do you mean, why do I allow them to do that? I mean, it's their hunt.
Yeah,
you know, it's their. Yeah, I mean, it's their thing. I mean, we all sit there, you know, because I do the same thing. I mean, we all sit there and stare at the animal that's hanging on the wall. Am I looking at the animal and the size, or am I looking at where I was when that happened and who was with me or whatever it may be? You know, I mean. You know, I mean, for instance, I mean, my sister has a 400-inch bull hanging on the wall that I mounted a couple years ago. And, I mean, I was laying right next to her when she shot it. I mean, and my cousin was on the other side. And, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a humongous bull, first of all. But, I mean, I'm looking at, you know, when I look at that, that's what I see.
Exactly.
You know, I remember seeing that. And then I remember walking up to the elk with her. You know, and I mean, I had done it numerous times with her. She had killed numerous elk before that, you know, but that time was obviously special. Yeah. And that's what I see when I look at that. Or even when I do it with my kids, it's the same thing. You know, I mean, my son shot his first mule deer this last year, and, you know, I mean, it was the greatest thing ever. So, you know, that's all that matters. You know, it was about that. I think it was a 24-inch 3-pointer, you know, that he shot with his bow. So, and my dad was with us. My sister was with us, and I mean, just the look on his face when he shot it, he trailed it and this and that, and he walked up to it laid on. That's what matters. It doesn't matter the size of it. So.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because I'm sitting here looking at my, you know, I'm sitting in my room right now where I have all of my mounts, and as well as a lot of my father-in-law's mounts that I was with him on when he shot them. And yeah, I don't look at that like that deer or that elk and think, oh, you know, that scores this, or oh, I need to get my tape measure out and really find out what that scores.
No.
Yeah, I think about the memories that I have, and my father-in-law's gone now, and so, you know, I think a lot of memories him and I had together hunting, and yeah, I couldn't care less about what the score of that animal is. Like, the only thing I care about is the time that I spent with him on the mountain.
And I think, you know, me, I have two views on it. Is me as a hunter, and also me as a taxidermist now. I think that's where we've seen the shift over the, you know, last decade or so is everything's about score nowadays almost. Mm-hmm. And we're starting to see it. I think we're starting to see it shift back a little bit to who cares what the score is for the most part. You know, I definitely can tell you that the residents here in Wyoming aren't all about that.
Good.
You know, the majority of the residents here in Wyoming they like shooting big animals, but they're more about, you know, big animals and quality of hunt and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think over, you know, I mean, we can blame it at all kinds of things, celebrity, you know, hunters and all this stuff on prime time. And, you know, you're only going to, you know, go for 10, 15 years on prime time if you're shooting, you know, 200-inch mule deer or whatever it may be.
Right.
But, you know, I think that's where the shift has been. And I get it all the time, obviously. I mean, I'm sure you know it.
Oh, yeah.
So do other taxidermists. You have guys walk in and they're like, you know, what's that thing score? Or, man, can I get this thing scored? And, you know, scored. And I'm gonna be honest, and some guys will probably laugh, is, and I know there's other taxidermists that are like me and different. Sometimes I'll score animals right there if I think it needs to be scored right there, but a lot of times I'll tell guys, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll score it when I get a chance, and sometimes I get to them, sometimes I don't, because I know, I can look at them and say, that's a 65-inch antelope, you know what I mean? And sometimes there's a lot of guys, a lot of my clients are like, man, first antelope, what do you think it scores? I'll score it real quick, or whatever it may be, but I think that's more of just them wanting to know, rather than, we all know those guys that's all about. It's all about score.
Right.
And it's crazy. Sometimes that stuff gets just out of hand.
I feel like my friends that are guys, hunting guys, that's where they're at, is they get so focused on scores because that's what their clients want. Their clients will come in, oh, I want a 375 bull or nothing else, or I want a 200-inch mule deer or nothing else, and so they get so fixated on what that score is. And I'm just not that way. I'm into hunting because I like hunting. I get just as excited about a 24-inch 4-point as I do really anything. So especially if I'm with the people that I want to be with. So at the end of the day, that's really what matters to me.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
Hey, let me ask you another really quick question, and I'll let you get out of here. And it's about replicas. Do you do replicas?
Yes.
So you said that very hesitantly. You make me nervous.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you that reproduction fish are. Is that what you're talking about, fish, or are you talking about replicas?
Antler replicas.
No, no, I do not.
Okay.
That is like a skill that you have to literally hone. I mean, it is. I've actually started watching some of the taxidermists that I follow on Instagram and stuff, or even guys that I've talked to a few times. That is definitely a great skill to have. Obviously, I don't have the time for that. That's obviously going to come from the bigger shops and that type of stuff when they have people that are specifically doing that.
Gotcha.
But it is a huge business now. I've seen it boom just since I've been a taxidermist.
Yeah.
To where it is now, where 8 years ago it was very, it was out there, but nothing like it is now. There's guys specifically that's all they do every day.
Wow.
And I've had a few animals in the shop that I've thought about saying, like my sister's bull. Who wouldn't want to redo almost a 400-inch bull?
Yeah.
But there's been a few I've had over the last few years that I've thought about it. I've actually told the guys, hey, maybe you should look into this. But it's a big business now, and a lot of it comes down to commercial taxidermy. So those guys are doing those replicas for commercial taxidermy, for Cabela's or Bass Pro,
right?
Or fishing games, or whatever it may be, some fancy house somewhere or whatever. It's big money. Sometimes I get a little bit concerned. If you have a 230-inch mule deer in your shop and you're worried about somebody knowing that you have a 230-inch mule deer in your shop, that's one of the things that let's just face it. Anything over 200 inches is going to be a minimum of $5,000, right?
Right.
And as bigger as it gets, that could be a $10,000 replica. Somebody takes those horns and sends it to somebody and replicas it, and they're making money off of it right then and there. You know what I mean? So, it's gotten a lot easier. The guys are definitely doing a great job on showing more of it, how to do it, and that type of stuff with fiberglass and different epoxies and that type of stuff. So, but I just don't have the time for that type of stuff. So,
gotcha.
Not my deal.
It's just you just see it, kind of popping up here and there. The people are doing it, making replicas for different things. Well, like you said, Cabela's, Bass Pro. There's a lot of those that are happening, and so
I've done it. I've done it twice on making a replica antler. So like a tine that was broke or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And you're starting to see a lot more of that. So instead of, which is one of the things that I hate, and I know there's other taxidermists out there that hate it too. but somebody breaks off a tine, or somebody wants a tine that was broken already and they want it fixed. Instead of doing the whole process of drilling it, putting a rod in, and then building the clay, you could just take the other side if it's similar, and then do epoxy and stuff, and then encase it and basically build your replica off of that, and then onto the new one, and then filling it and then making it that way. So a lot of guys are doing that. I've done it a couple of times. It works well. Again, it's about time, and time is money.
Right.
And when somebody like me, I mean, if you have a shop of 4 or 5, 10 guys, then yeah, I mean, most times, the shops that have guys that are doing that tine repair, that type of stuff, but somebody like me, I just don't have the time for it. So
yeah, gotcha. Cool. Well, I'm very curious about that. I mean, just taxidermy in general. You guys, and you actually, you hit it on the head earlier when you said most taxidermists are artists, and I truly believe that. If you look at the stuff that you guys do, you even touched on the fish. Fish are unreal. That's some serious artistry. But I'm looking at this bull elk mount right now, this shoulder mount, and that's true artistry right there. To be able to take an animal that was alive and turn it into that's impressive.
It's crazy, and that's why, I put artistry into my business name, when I was trying to find a business name. And, I thought about it, am I just a taxidermist, or am I going to be an artist?
Uh-huh.
And I never in anybody's wildest dream thought I'd be an artist of any sort. And I still tell people, I'm like, I don't know if I'm an artist. But yeah, I mean, bringing those animals back to life, or as close as you can to it. It's definitely artistry. I mean, building those scenes, and that's the fun stuff that I like to do, is building those scenes around the animals and doing that type of stuff, and showing what you see, and what you're envisioning in that animal.
Yeah.
It's definitely artistry type, and it's crazy how the profession has changed, and what some of these guys and women are doing is just unheard of. I mean, it's just not. And some of the projects and stuff that they're doing that you see out there, maybe not even at the competition shows, but you're seeing just on their social media platforms. It's just crazy, some of the mounts that they're doing nowadays. So
yeah,
some of it I think is a little bit too much, but man, it's just nuts, some of the stuff that they're doing.
Well, I've seen a lot of the stuff that you do, and I'll give you kudos as well. You're being very humble, but you've got some pretty amazing stuff that you've done. I was looking at some of your pictures earlier today, and there was one you posted, I think, pretty recently. It was a double pronghorn mount, and I thought that is freaking amazing. So kudos to you and what you're doing. You do a fantastic job, man.
I appreciate it. Like I said, I just kind of go with what the client. Most of my clients just say, "Hey, make it look good," and I just kind of go. It's funny. I'll stand there for literally hours sometimes looking at stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I'll look at all different directions of the animal or the pedestal that I'm building or whatever it may be. And sometimes I'll just leave it and walk away for a few hours and come back. And then I'll make an adjustment, and then I'll leave it again. And sometimes I might leave it for a day or two and then come back. And it's just the way I do it. It's my process of how I do it. It's kind of weird, but it usually works out well. So, yeah. Works out.
Well, awesome. Well, Owen, I appreciate you coming on and sharing this information. I think this is going to be very helpful for people, because, like I said, there's a lot of people that get into this, they get they get the animal and they're like, what the heck do I do? So I hope that this information that you shared today will be enlightening to a lot of people. If anybody, I think everybody needs to go follow you on Instagram. But if anybody has more questions that we weren't able to touch on today, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Is it Instagram or Facebook? What's best for you?
Instagram. Instagram's the best way to get a hold of me. They can DM me or on Instagram, or they can just text me on my cell phone, or just give me a call. Okay. When I'm working in the shop, I have my earpieces in, and that's the easiest way. It's actually been the best thing ever. But when you're mounting an animal and you just can't answer your phone, you already have your earbuds in, so you're like, oh yeah, this works well. But I don't have clay or glue all over my $800 iPhone. So,
right.
But that's usually the best way to get hold of me. They can call, text, or direct message me on Instagram. So.
Okay, and if anybody's up in the Gillette, Wyoming area and shoot a monster, give him a call because he does some pretty amazing work. If you go onto his Instagram page, it's Prairie Ghost Artistry, all one word. But go on and check it out. He's got some pretty amazing stuff. Like I said, I was on there earlier today looking at some of the stuff, and I don't know, I'm so weird. I love looking at this kind of stuff. I mean, hunting is my life, my passion, and so I spend hours looking at this stuff. So keep up the good work, Owen. Appreciate you, what you've done for eHunter, and just appreciate you being willing to come on and record this podcast tonight. I hope that it answers a lot of people's questions. It definitely answered a lot of my questions, and hopefully everybody was able to glean a little information from it. So thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Anytime.
Cool. And actually, let's not make this the last podcast. Let's jump on another podcast in the future and talk more taxidermy.
Absolutely. Anytime. You come, anything that you have in mind or whatever, just let me know. We could always do this any other time. So I'm always up for it.
Sounds good, man. Cool. Well, I'll let you back to your evening. Appreciate you, and hopefully we talk soon.